Ah, Hollywood. Another day, another reboot. It feels like every time you open social media, another childhood classic is being remade. Prequels, sequels, remakes, spin-offs, reimaginings. At this point, it would be easier to give you a list of classic movies that haven't been remade. You know that feeling you get when you hear another classic is getting rebooted and your first thought is just, why? Or more importantly, who cares? I guess a Harry Potter reboot was inevitable. It's been 24 years since the first Harry Potter film was released, and Warner Brothers has decided it's time to start over with a new television series based on the books set to premiere in 2027. Each season is going to cover a different book in the 7-book series. And news just broke out that Netflix has bought the rights to Warner Brothers and all of its HBO content for $82.7 billion halfway through production of this new show. So it is very possible that this new Harry Potter series will premiere on Netflix. How this affects production, we still don't know, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Look, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. I have read every Harry Potter book multiple times, and I must have seen the movies, God, I don't even want to know how many times. And I've played a ton of computer and console games. I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, so I was the perfect age for Harry Potter mania. Growing up, there were 3 major movie franchises: Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Pirates of the Caribbean. So, as a lifelong fan, you would think that I'd be more excited about this reboot, right? But I'm not. Because despite all the money, all the talent, and all the nostalgia involved, and whether it's HBO or Netflix or whoever, the broken promise that this series delivers is ultimately what will doom this show. Despite the first book coming out back in 1997, the Harry Potter fan base is still going strong. Potter books still sell out, theme parks are packed, and fans still cosplay the characters. But the truth is, for a while, Warner Brothers was quietly worried that the Harry Potter magic was starting to fade. The prequel/spin-off movie series, Fantastic Beasts, was supposed to keep the brand alive. The first film did fine, but The Crimes of Grindelwald was terrible and struggled to make a profit, and I didn't even bother with Secrets of Dumbledore. But then again, nobody else did as the film bombed. Meanwhile, other young adult giants like Twilight and The Hunger Games have faded away. As of now, there are no plans to make any Twilight spin-offs, and the Hunger Games prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, didn't exactly set the world on fire. So what was left? Warner Brothers had one last Hail Mary to keep the Potterverse alive, and its name was Hogwarts Legacy, an open-world RPG set in the 1890s wizarding world. It lets players live the Hogwarts student fantasy, learning spells, brewing potions, taming beasts, and saving the world from evil wizards. And it was a massive hit. Released in February of 2023, within its first month alone, Hogwarts Legacy sold over 12 million copies, and it became the highest-selling game of 2023. So, it wasn't a coincidence that 2 months later, Warner Brothers officially announced the TV reboot. I guarantee that a bunch of Warner Brothers executives looked at the success of the game and thought, phew, thank God for that. For a second there, I actually thought we'd have to come up with something original. So what is the point of rebooting Harry Potter as a TV series? I guess the biggest selling point is faithfulness. I love the original movies, but even I have to admit they have their problems. The movies had a limited amount of time, so a lot of things had to be cut out. So I can understand the appeal of a television series. Special effects have come a long way, and because each book will get its own season, now every subplot, every character, every line that got cut out of the films can be restored. One of the best arguments for this reboot is the promise of a faithful adaptation. A one-to-one adaptation, if you will, or as close to a one-to-one as humanly possible. But that promise is already starting to show cracks. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The casting of Paapa Essiedu as Severus Snape. I'm sorry to say this, but having a black Severus Snape is a problem. Don't get me wrong, race-swapping characters isn't inherently wrong. I might be one of the few people on this planet that actually thinks that Michael Clark Duncan as the Kingpin in the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie was much better than the Vincent D'Onofrio version in the Netflix television series. Vincent D'Onofrio is a fine actor, but he never felt like the Kingpin from the the comics. He lacked menace. He always seemed more apologetic than threatening. Michael Clark Duncan, on the other hand, owned the role. The moment he entered a room, he made it clear he was the most dangerous man in Hell's Kitchen, capturing everything that made the character unforgettable in the comics. My point is, race-swap characters can work if you cast the right actor, and I don't envy anyone who had to follow in Alan Rickman's footsteps. The man did an incredible job bringing Snape to life. Next to Hans Gruber from Die Hard, this might be his most iconic role. So Warner Brothers had to knock it out of the park when casting Severus Snape. And I'm sure that Paapa Essiedu is very talented. He's a classically trained Shakespearean actor. But the whole selling point of rebooting the series was the promise of a one-to-one adaptation. And then before you even shoot one frame of the series, you already break that promise by changing the look of one of the most iconic characters. If they're willing to do that just for the sake of diversity, then why should I believe they're not going to change other important things just because they want to? And if I'm going to be honest, of all the characters that I thought were going to be race swapped, I never thought it was going to be Snape. Before the casting was announced, if I had to put my money on it, I would have thought they were going to race swap Ron Weasley. I don't know what it is, but lately, Hollywood has been hell-bent on race swapping every red-headed character in fiction. From The Little Mermaid, MJ Watson, Batgirl, Commissioner Gordon, Tris Marigold, Starfire, Heimdall, the list goes on and on of red-headed characters played by non-white people. So you can only imagine my surprise when they announced who was going to play the Golden Trio, that Ron Weasley, who is a white red-headed boy, was going to be played by a white red-headed boy. And for the last 10 years, we have seen countless beloved franchises go down the drain because Hollywood executives make bad decisions purely for the sake of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Franchises like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time, The Witcher have all been destroyed because the people running those shows were more interested in checking arbitrary diversity boxes than being loyal to the source material. So you can understand why the casting of Essiedu doesn't fill me with confidence. If they had done this, say, 10 years ago, I might have been more forgiving, but those days are long gone. The deeper issue is that Harry Potter doesn't need a reboot. The original films are iconic. They're part of cinematic history. The music, the sets, the cast. When most people read the books, they still picture Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint. The first 3 movies were very faithful to the books, missing some details like Peeves the Poltergeist, The Headless Hunt, the Fidelius Charm, or the origins of the Shrieking Shack. It's not until Goblet of Fire that the movies started to get into a bit of trouble. The first movie, Sorcerer's Stone, was 2.5 hours. That's pretty long for a kid's movie. As the books got longer and longer, the running time for the movies had to stay relatively the same. After all, no studio would ever put out a 10-hour movie in cinemas. But even with these problems, the movie still maintained the core story of the books. Anyone who only watched the movies got a pretty good interpretation of what the books were like, and that creates a problem. There's no mystery. Movies and TV shows live or die nowadays based on how many tweets and chatter they get on social media. So how does this show expect to get people coming back week after week when they already know what's going to happen? It'll be season 1. What's the Sorcerer's Stone? Where is it? Why does Voldemort want it? And people will say, it's a stone that gives you eternal life, it's hidden underneath Hogwarts, and Voldemort wants it to come back to full strength. I know this because I saw the movie 20 years ago. Season 2. Where is the Chamber of Secrets? Who opened it? What is the monster that lives inside of it? It's in the second floor in the girls' bathroom. Ginny Weasley opened it under the influence of Tom Riddle. The monster is a giant snake called a basilisk. I know this because I saw the movie 20 years ago. Season 3. Where is Sirius Black? Why does he want to kill Harry? He's hiding in Hogwarts. He was framed for a crime he didn't commit. I know this because I saw the movie 20 years ago. Season 4. Who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire? It was Barty Crouch. Saw the movie 20 years ago. Season 5. What weapon? Prophecy 20 years ago. You get the point. Game of Thrones was one of the biggest shows of all time because it kept you guessing as to who was going to live or die and who would ultimately sit on the Iron Throne. And sure, people could have read the books to get ahead of the show, but let's face it, most people who watched the series didn't read the books. But with this series, it has the disadvantage of having to stay fresh when there are people out there who have watched the movies and or read the books. My guess is that the first half of the first season will do well due to sheer curiosity, but as the show goes on, the ratings will drop off. The first book doesn't talk about the Sorcerer's Stone until chapter 13. So, if the first season will have 10 full-hour episodes, they won't talk about the stone till episode 6 or 7, which means that you can watch the original movie twice before the show even starts talking about what the stone is. When the reboot was announced, HBO said that this series was going to take 10 years in total to make, just like the original movies did. Now, with this new Netflix merger, it might slow down production with the changing of the guard. But even if it doesn't, making this series in just 10 years is never going to happen. Nowadays, big TV shows take at least 2 to 3 years in between seasons. It was 3 years between season 1 and 2 of Netflix's Wednesday, and that show doesn't have the same amount of special effects and sets the Potter show will need. If the first season will premiere in 2027 and it takes on average 2 years between seasons, that means that season 7, the final one, will premiere in 2041, 16 years from now, which is 30 years since Deathly Hallows Part 2. Will anybody seriously care by then? I mean, Netflix is famous for canceling TV shows before they even get to finish their story, and if the ratings don't do well in later seasons, I wouldn't be surprised if this gets canceled. Even if they could somehow pull this off in 10 years, they're gonna have to work the cast, crew, and special effects team to death in order to achieve this. It's such a shame that these big studios spend so much time, money, and resources on stories that have already been told. Being one of the biggest entertainment businesses in the world, they could invest into a brand new franchise and turn it into a household name, just like they did with Game of Thrones. And while the rest of the cast looks promising, the Potter TV show isn't doomed by its talent or its budget. It's doomed by its lack of purpose. If I turn out to be wrong and it becomes a huge hit, I'll come back to this and eat my own words. But as of now, I don't think there's enough creativity to keep the magic alive.